everyone, and welcome to an all-new episode of MMA Untold, where we take you inside the lives and careers of fighters, key rivalries, and historic events that make mixed martial arts the greatest sport on earth. My name is Taylor Gabriels. To my right, as always, is the Godfather, Tim Thomas, who just returned from doing a number 2. And to his left, the man with his pants off, Mr. Jake Copeland. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello. Howdy. Jake, I prefer to be known as the Caucasian Crippler from now on.
I think we're going to give you a nickname by the end of this episode, and I'm leaning towards the Fireman since your microphone is sitting on a copy of Joe Hill's book.
A signed copy.
A signed copy. Well done, sir.
Don't mean to big dog anybody, but...
Whoa! Speaking of big dogs, today's episode will be profiling the life and career of the Black Beast, Derrick Lewis. And be sure to stick around for the end of the episode where we'll dive a bit deeper into Lewis's story and discuss our takeaways from the episode.
Well, to be totally honest, this one was a little difficult to research because anytime we got any traction going, we'd either be exchanging Tito Ortiz links or you'd bring up Kid Rock. You want to explain yourself? Or I can explain the Tito part of this, but that's for another episode.
Yeah,
what about Kid Rock?
I'll explain that in the middle of Black Beast's story. There was a reason that I went down that rabbit hole, but we'll get there later.
Because there's...
I'll get there. Don't you worry.
Bullfrog or bullfrog, bull god. I am the bull god. Anyone remember?
I am the bullfrog. I am free.
That's phenomenal.
Speaking of derail. All right. Well, this is the story of Derrick Lewis. Upwards of 265 pounds, Derrick Lewis is one of the largest hard-hitting heavyweights in the UFC and is tied for the most knockouts in UFC history with 10. But it's not Lewis's size or power that makes him stand out from his competitors, nor is it his post-fight celebration where he pounds his chest before falling to the ground, his fist crashing to the canvas, unleashing the beast within. For Lewis, it's all about what comes next. What happens when the dust has settled and Joe Rogan approaches, microphone in hand, ready to make sense of the violence that's just occurred. It is here where Lewis truly shines.
What's awesome about Derrick Lewis is that, you know, like you make the number 2 joke and the pants joke with Jake, like when you did the intros. And what's awesome about him is you think he's just commenting on something he actually has to do or he actually did. But like when you get to know him and you listen to him speak, he really is improvising so much of this. And yet it's so natural that people believe it. He's like the best of a stand-up comedian who's doing a bit and you're not sure that you don't know that he's told it 100 times because it sounds like he's just telling a story to his friend.
And it's so dry that it goes over half the people's heads. It's amazing.
Yes. So he really is like, you know, we always talk about when we did the Brendan Schaub episode, we talked about somebody's future as a comedian doing this or that. With Black Beast, this is a guy that is seriously carving out his spot. It's like his quick wit is incredible, and it just amazes me how it has totally, become his new identity, basically.
Yeah, I love the enigma that is Black Beast, because on one hand, you have such a very honest person, which is really refreshing in this fight game that we're, because everybody's trying to be something and trying to put on a show and present something that probably really doesn't represent who they are behind closed doors. But with Black Beast, you feel like you're really getting an authentic look into who he really is. But at the same time, on the flip side of that, there's this other part of him that's very dry, very sarcastic, and you can't tell which one you're getting.
That's what I was about to say. Is I was gonna, you know, mid call out here 5 minutes in, but like ask you if you were almost a mark for it, because the reality is like, he isn't necessarily telling the truth often at all, but he's so good at it that people really do buy it. Do you know what I mean? And as, like, I didn't know if you were buying into it, but he's really bullshitting.
I think he's good at telling the truth when it comes to, although, you know, doing the research on this, I looked back at a lot of his post-fight press conferences, not just what he says in the octagon, but a lot of times he is talking about how his cardio sucks and he needs to go back to the drawing board and he doesn't want to fight. And I don't know if he's lying there. I genuinely believe that. And then, you know, the UFC comes along with a paycheck and he changes his mind, which is a fairly natural thing to do. But I think when it comes to self-assessment, he's very refreshingly honest.
Oh, sure.
When it comes to having to take a shit because he got kicked in the gut, obviously, you know, I'm not falling for that.
Yeah.
But the way he delivers it, like Jake said, it's just so natural and dry that it's very hard to distinguish.
Oh yeah, it's great too because people like Joe Lozon and a few others in particular have mentioned like when you're in there, sometimes you do have to kind of take a shit, and it's kind of great because even me, who I know what's happening, but I'm like, well, I have heard that before. Does he have to take a shit?
And there have been fighters that have done that in the octagon,
it's incredible.
In the cage. So yeah, this is going to be an interesting episode because Derrick's got some dark stuff in his childhood, which we'll get to almost right away. But then there's a lot of humor in this story as well. So we're going to have fun with this one. But before the Black Beast was waxing poetic inside the octagon, he was navigating life on the streets of New Orleans, Louisiana. Raised by his mother, Lewis was the second of 7 children. Though the family longed for a strong male influence, the man who stepped in to fill that role was a nightmare worse than Derrick or his mother could have ever imagined.
Oh, man, I think it was the Mendenhall article where he framed it like he basically said, like, imagine a fight every night where your mom's in the main event and she's fighting somebody that she can't beat or escape. And I was like, Jesus Christ. Like, it gives me chills even just repeating it. And he grew up in this environment. And eventually he gets involved. Doesn't he start to fight back himself?
Yeah, when he's like 13, he starts swinging, but he was saying like as young as 8, he was trying to pull the guy off of her and that kind of stuff.
I mean, God, that's just...
I can't imagine, like, you would have to live your whole life just with that looming over everything. You know, your whole life has to be an escape from that, and then you come back home, and there it is again. It's got to be awful.
I mean, obviously, it's tragic and horrific, but seldom do we think about the mixture of emotions for an 8-year-old to be handling fear, helplessness, anger, bitterness, confusion, all at the same time. I mean, I adults have a hard time processing those emotions, so I can't imagine what that does to an 8-year-old.
It's amazing that he is as lighthearted as he is now when you just hear his story, what he grew up with, because I just, man, that blows my mind. That literally is living a nightmare every day.
But that lightheartedness doesn't come right away. He goes through some foul stuff to get to that point, and the beatings eventually got so frequent and so severe that Derrick's mother took him and his siblings and fled to Houston, Texas. And this marked a chance for Derrick and his family to start a new life, away from the violence and fear that plagued their home for so many years. But sadly, as is often the case, more problems followed. For Derrick, those problems moved from inside the home to outside his front door, literally.
Did you see the comment he made to his mom where he's like, even in the middle, this is such a little kid thing, even in the middle of all the domestic abuse and everything going on at home, that he's like, we can't go to Texas. They're going to like dress me up with a cowboy hat and ride horses. And like, that is such little kid logic.
And he was right.
I mean, that's phenomenal. That's like, again, when I moved to town over when we were in elementary school, and it was like the end of the world. We can't move 5 minutes that way. My whole life's going to fall apart.
Yeah, I moved to Illinois when I was 9 from South Carolina, and it's crazy. Obviously, I'm sure he wanted to get away from what was going on at home, but I'm sure he also had friends and kids at school that he, connected with that you don't want to leave at that age. And at this point, he's 13, 14. So, I mean, he's a teenager. I'm sure that he had friends and he didn't want to leave there. So, man, again, this weird mixture of wanting to get away but not wanting to go where you're headed.
Yep.
It's got to be kind of weird. So he leaves the violence inside the home, but then, and we don't really know how this transition works, but Derrick explains it, that basically as soon as he gets to Houston, he's getting in fights immediately. I don't know if it's because he's a new kid in town. I'm not sure why that is. If he's just a big guy and it's like being in prison, you want to go after the big guy. I'm not sure what it is, but he's getting into fistfights all the time, and then it eventually leads to literally his front door where people are coming and knocking on the door, step foot outside, let's go.
Well, I mean, like we talked about, it seems like he's been steeped in like this culture of violence since he was very little. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure you'd think nothing of getting into random fights throughout your day. That's just a normal day. If you're used to coming home and watching fights, sure, you get to fight out in the street.
It's amazing. Every time we read these, when we did like Woodley's, just what he got off the bus to when he come back from school, like just the gangs like right there. And you just hear Derrick Lewis, like the fights. He said he was getting in trouble like every single week. You just realize like a lot of times we grow up, we're pretty isolated from a lot of this around here. You know what I mean? It's wild, man.
Yeah, our fights were online on video games.
Yeah, seriously.
That's it.
I had some guys try to steal my shoes,
Okay,
and I fought them off. Thank you.
How am I just finding this out? Have we gone on
this was like 2 blocks away from Mrs. Leckby's house. And some guys pushed me down, tried to steal my shoes. I kicked one in the shin. I threw some punches, and I started like waddling over. I wouldn't call what I did running. Really. I was portly.
I mean, our apartment complex wasn't the best. You ever go back there recently?
It's horrifying. The Jake Copeland story might be a little bit different if I grew up in those apartments right now as opposed to when I did. It's a little rough.
When I took my wife to see it, and she immediately, it was like adorable for like 30 seconds. She's like, "Oh, that's crazy. So Jake was over here and you were over here. That's awesome." And she's like, "Hey, can we go now?" Or I'm like,
"Any way we can hit
that
gas
you know
pedal?
what? Let's go ahead and get out of here, huh?"
That's crazy. It's not great. And then it's like a mile away from this gorgeous renovated downtown. It's really a strange little situation.
It's how most ghettos are. They're usually really close to well-developed areas. Well, the grass in Houston wasn't much greener than that in New Orleans. But as Lewis grew, he managed to channel his pent-up aggression in a more positive direction. Excelling in football at his high school and briefly attending a local boxing gym, with graduation on the horizon and a scholarship to play ball at Kilgore Community College, Derrick's path in life was beginning to straighten. Then, Lewis met an older woman, a divorcee whose ex-husband was said to be affiliated with the KKK. And just like that, trouble found Lewis once again, only this time, it would land him in prison for over 3 years.
Now, let's be clear that the reason he goes to prison for the 3 years is because he violates his probation, because he doesn't have the money to get himself to the classes that he has to take or whatever it is. I don't know if it's for the anger management, whatever. So he misses some of those. He doesn't pay the fines that he needs to pay, because there are some presentations of this story, like when the UFC does like their countdown or whatever. They just straight up tell it like, hey, he has a aggravated assault. He ends up in prison for 3 years. I just don't think that's fair. You have to go back and go, okay, he wouldn't even have been in prison, 1, if he had the money or the way to get to the class. And 2, let's look at the details of that story. That's insane. He, again, fools around with a 36-year-old. Sounds like she started it. So she came on to him. He does nothing wrong. And then he gets approached by a guy. The guy's following him in a car, right? Is he following him around?
Him and his friends in a car, and then I believe Black Beast wanted it to be known that he was in there in the car, so he made sure the guys see him, and they drove around because he didn't want it to happen in front of his street, like in front of his house, in case it got wild.
Okay.
So they turned a corner or whatever, and then Black Beast got up and walked up to the truck.
And I know the guy goes to get the shot because the guy has a shotgun with him.
He has a shotgun in his truck.
Yeah, in the passenger seat.
Lewis and friends were coming from a party. So, again, it's weird because you get these stories and you only obviously get pieces of them way after the event. And I'm in no way saying Derrick Lewis is in the wrong for any of this. But let's try to just picture this the way it really was. They were coming from a party. They were drinking. Lewis was getting into fights regularly at this point. He's sleeping around with, a divorced woman, and her husband, supposedly affiliated with the KKK.
Ex-husband, sir.
Ex-husband, yes. Yes, is driving around looking for him. My guess is they got word that he was out looking for Derrick. So they leave. They don't want it to happen in front of the house. He goes to a remote location, and the guy reaches for the shotgun, and Lewis approaches the car, reaches in the car, and just starts pounding the guy's face in before he can get the shotgun.
Which makes sense. I mean, you don't really have a whole lot of options. Some guy's reaching for a shotgun. You can either
you're not talking
A,
yourself
run,
out of that.
Or B, start punching. And absolutely.
Which is why I say he is in no way in the wrong here. I just want to give the total picture of the story, because there's many iterations of this story, depending on what account you read of it. In some, it's just some KKK guy tried to pull a shotgun on him. In others, it's this guy was just looking for him, and Lewis really kind of instigated it. So it just depends on where you're getting your source.
It just pisses me off. I'm sorry to cut you off, Jake. It pisses me off, though, when like the UFC tells it and they don't give those details, because some people group it together, people we know group it together and just call it, hey, it's assault, right? Well, this is a different scenario. I mean, if we don't know, if he didn't start punching this gentleman, he might have died. That guy was grabbing a shotgun.
Yeah, there's not too many scenarios where that turns out good for Derrick.
And Lewis even stopped punching him when like the truck like started to roll because it wasn't in park and it was going to hit something else. He even stopped. I mean, he kept himself composed. I mean, he doesn't need the guy lose vision in the eye.
Yeah, he broke like orbital bone.
And so I mean, he hurt him really bad, but I mean, he even had the wherewithal to kind of stop in the middle of it. So I just get really upset when people don't give the details and just say straight up like, yep, assault, jail for 3 years. To me, it's totally different.
Yeah, I mean, we actually had a friend, we won't say who, but send us a text message once they found out we were doing this story and said, you know, the guy's a piece of shit. He's beating up guys, he's going to jail for assault, and it's not the total picture, and that's part of why we're here, is to give that full, complete picture.
Yeah. It's funny because I'm sorry to keep going back to it, but when I was watching that countdown, I was like, there again, that's why this podcast exists. This is exactly why we do this, because they're just scraping on the surface of what happened with him. It's just not a good representation of who he really is at all.
And maybe the most important thing they left out was what prison he went to, which my man Mendenhall mentions in his article. He went to Sugarland in the infamous Central Unit, where Hootie Leadbelly Ledbetter was at.
Oh, hey, Beast.
All right, so this is how I got onto Kid Rock. Okay, so I was looking up Hootie Leadbelly Ledbetter. Whew, say that 10 times.
Excuse me? Yeah.
Do you know who that is, either of you?
Father of the Blues, right?
Yes.
Up there with Robert, what's his face?
Yeah, he's the man.
You're in his wheelhouse.
Do you know?
Jake's
Okay, I know I'm in
wheelhouse.
Jake's wheelhouse. So, Tim, I'll direct this towards you.
I got no shot.
Do you know one of the most famous songs that he's known for? And
No.
technically, I don't know if he's the one who actually wrote it specifically.
BGL covered 2 Leadbelly songs. Just so
Really?
you know. Yeah. So
Man.
you better get this right. Yeah.
Shit, I'm on the spot here. I don't have a chance in hell.
Nirvana covered one of them in their Unplugged, the last
Really?
song they sang in that, or one of the last song they sang.
See, now I'm just thinking of the Alice in Chains Killers.
Well,
Me.
that
Bitch.
well,
You guys wanna go
it's
down
funny you
that
say
route.
that. It's very funny you say that. So, okay, it's Where Did You Sleep Last Night?
Okay.
And I think the original was Black Girl, Where Did You Sleep Last Night? And it's an old spiritual song, but he's the one who kind of popularized it. And then Nirvana took his version, because there's been many versions, and then sang it during their Unplugged. So I'm watching his version, then I'm watching Nirvana's Unplugged version again, just remembering how wonderful that was. And then, of course, my recommended videos on the side was Alice in Chains. So then I go to that. And then somehow there's a Rage Against the Machine at Woodstock or something video on there. So I decided to click on that.
Would you say you were down in a rabbit
I was in
hole?
a rabbit hole. Absolutely.
Hey-o.
And then that eventually led me to Kid Rock, Ba Wa Da Ba. And then so that's me sitting in the cigar shop where I do my research, blasting Kid Rock. So it's
As
good
one
times.
does.
Yeah. So
Your
I went from
your
the father
cred
of
there.
blues to Kid Rock.
I'm sorry to all the Kid Rock fans out there, but your credibility at that cigar shop took a major hit when you were just blasting the Kid Rock.
That's not the first time.
Yeah. No.
So one could argue that Derrick's 3 years in prison were possibly the worst of his turbulent young life. But for Derrick, they were an integral part of his transformation. Lewis says of his time in prison, I really do believe it helped me because I didn't have a father figure growing up. There was nothing positive about my childhood, so I believe prison was the best thing that could have happened. My mind is more clear. I see everything more clear. I understand a lot more. That's the reason I want my own kids to have a better childhood. And after Lewis's release, he takes a job driving a tow truck for AAA. And by all accounts, he was content with his new career, if not happy. Did
you hear that when he was doing the tow truck driving, that he would just sit there bored, literally hoping people would get in accidents?
Sounds right.
He's just like, please get in an accident. He's desperately looking for shit to do. That was so Derrick Lewis. Bless his heart.
Very fitting. So with one kid at the time to support, a steady job was crucial. But fighting was in Lewis's nature, and it would take 2 special people to draw that spirit back out of him. One was a close friend of Derrick's who pestered him to pursue MMA. The other was the hardest hitting boxer of all time, grill master George Foreman.
How dare you? You would bring the goddamn grill into this.
It's what he's known for, isn't it?
You know, it almost wasn't his, right? You know, first, you son of a bitch. You know Hulk Hogan passed on that thing,
Big
right?
time.
You know that?
Really?
So Hogan's agent calls you Hulk Hogan, all untold. So last time we'll ever do this. His agent called him one day and was like, hey, we want to get you like in the appliance industry, like at the kitchen items. And he's like, we got a couple things for you here. We got a grill and we got a meatball maker. And Hogan's like, we're doing the meatballs. And he's like,
I would have done the same thing.
Meatballs were so good. And then he's like, you can give the grill to your other client. And the other client was George Foreman.
Now, can you imagine Hulk Hogan selling the Foreman grill?
I can. I mean, I can see his goofy ass with the bandana on doing it.
Oh, my God.
Oh, let me tell you something, brother. Nothing drains the grease.
It would have been incredible.
Yeah, so he gave that up $200 million later, and I don't think the meatball maker really
the cornballer.
Yeah, the cornballer. Yes, literally the best. No, but look, back on track. Derrick Lewis. One thing is his comedy and everything is a bit of a distraction from his fighting ability, and a lot of people just view him as this big brawler. Listen, if George Foreman finds you and sees the way you hit in the gym and wants to push you, and we'll see kind of some of the things he does for Derrick Lewis. Derrick Lewis is a special fighter. You know, he's a criminally underrated, honestly. But
don't say criminally.
Well, sorry. God damn it. I can't say anything in 2018. I can't say anything. But he's very underrated. And the fact that you have a legend who's more than a goddamn grill master backing him says a lot.
So, I mean, a lot went into this. So he before he went to prison, he was supposed to graduate. He was supposed to go to college. Obviously, that goes out the window. He had a scholarship.
Yeah, that sucks, man.
To go. That's out the window. He gets out of prison. He's driving a tow truck. Like you said, he's hoping people get into accidents so that he has some work. But then his friend pushes him like, you need to try this MMA thing out. You need to take some amateur fights. And at the time, he's doing both. He's boxing and he's dabbling in MMA a little bit. Well, as we talk about often on this podcast, MMA isn't really a thing. I mean, it is. It's around. Don't get me wrong. But boxing is a much more lucrative path. And you have George Foreman literally in your corner pushing you in that direction. Why would anyone choose MMA over boxing in that scenario? In particular, when you have George Foreman and his people giving you a car. So here you go. Here's a car. Train with us. We're going to give you stuff even before you become a name in boxing. So he's already being paid in this field. MMA is providing him nothing, and yet he chooses MMA.
Hey, man, you have to look at this even now, even as he's about to main event Madison Square Garden in the heavyweight title fight. You really do have to look back at this and wonder, was it the right decision? Honestly, you have to ask yourself that, because he has the power. He has technique. He's got Foreman in his corner. He could be billed as the protege. And heavyweight boxing, they've got 2 or 3 people here or there. But, like, look, give him 5-10 years to train. Maybe he could hang with somebody like a Fury. Look, Deontay Wilder is a great athlete, but, like, he didn't have much boxing training when he got into it. I'm just saying, you give Derrick Lewis 5-10 years to train for Deontay Wilder, who knows what would have happened? And he could be a huge name in boxing, and the big heavyweight champion in boxing makes a ton of money, man. So who knows?
I could be wrong, but doesn't power play up better in MMA with the smaller gloves, though? I mean, if that's your main key, like, he does have technique too, but if power is in your wheelhouse, man, you connect with those small, 3-ounce gloves, whatever they are. Like, that guy's out, as we've seen throughout Lewis's career. So I don't know. I think that's something to consider too. Not saying you can't knock people out in boxing, but it's a lot easier with those smaller gloves.
You're totally right. My counter to that would be so many of his losses, which there aren't many in the UFC, actually. So many of his losses are when he gets taken down and he really struggles. And that's, again, what could be an issue with someone like Cormier. But if he got to just stand with people, which is what he wants to do anyways most of the time, he has the type of strength that just can't be replicated. And he puts people down. And look, you've seen Deontay Wilder fight. there's hardly any technique there at all. It's just winging punches. I mean, he literally just throws bombs, hoping one lands, to the point where he almost falls over half the time when he's throwing them. So I'm just saying, put Derrick Lewis in there with somebody like that, with Derrick Lewis's chin.
And not right now. You're not saying put him in there right now.
And
so for listeners thinking you're crazy.
No, and there's nothing we hate more than this current narrative of like everybody wants to go box. I'm just saying we're at a fork in the road in Derrick Lewis's life in this story. And the way it could be told is he made the right decision because he's in a heavyweight title fight. I'm just saying, if you go back at this point and take the other direction, who knows, man? He might... Look, it's an awesome story, and I love this guy, but he might have made a ton more money boxing. We'll never know.
Possibly, but the reason that he chose MMA is that he took a fight, smashed the guy's face in, and fell in love with the sport in a different way than he enjoyed boxing. And in that regard, I would say he chose the right path because he didn't go where the money was. He went where his passion was. And you got to respect somebody that does that, especially coming from his background where, you know, he chooses MMA and they take the car away from him and he doesn't have a car.
Right.
You know, I mean, it really was a big, big deal. And most of us would have just gone where the money was. But for Lewis, he chose MMA.
No, I mean, it is awesome that he followed that direction. I just think it's interesting to kind of go down that theory and just see what would have happened.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Wish we could just relive it and see. Never know, though.
Now that we're about halfway through, I do want to remind you guys that you still have to the rest of the episode to decide on a nickname. I'm still leaning towards Caucasian Crippler. But even though that's an incredible nickname, can we talk about Derrick's nickname by any chance?
Yeah, and perhaps probably the best tell that he chose the right career path is the fact that he would have never earned this nickname otherwise.
Or that celebration. Can we just put them hand in hand? Unbelievable. Which I go bringing up Mighty Mouse again. The fucking Mighty Mouse basically stole. Have you seen that stupid gif of, I don't know what he's doing in that thing. Can you even tell me what was Mighty Mouse going for? Basically ripping off Black Beast.
Doesn't matter because nobody watches Mighty Mouse's fights.
And we won't have to anymore because he's in ONE FC now.
You just pissed off the 12 Mighty Mouse fans that listen to this. How dare you?
Thank God. We did like 75 Untolds about how much we hate him. I think people understand. Just because I respect him doesn't mean I have to like him. All right, you want to talk about Black Beast's nickname or whatever? Go ahead.
Yeah,
Alex.
so when he delves into MMA, he joins the Silverback Fight Club. I guess that's what it would be called. And that's obviously pretty telling to how he gets his nickname, but he was the big guy in the room.
Call him like the mascot, basically. They call him like the official mascot of the
official
team.
mascot of the team. And then eventually he's dubbed the Black Beast. And then later that in-ring celebration sort of develops and evolves into what it is today. So he takes that Black Beast and then watch it. I think he says like he was watching videos of gorillas, like, you know, and he sort of,
as one does,
pounded. Well, I think he pounded his chest before his fights at the time. So that's why they gave him the name the Black Beast. And then he just took that and extended it and took a gorilla smashing kind of thing and brought it to the ground, and sort of it evolved from there into what it is now. And it's absolutely glorious.
Has anyone thrown bananas in the octagon yet?
No,
because
that's borderline racist.
No,
sir.
I can't say. I can't.
No,
he's
I
a
can't
gorilla.
say
Criminally underrated.
No, come
and
on.
You can't,
That
sir.
is- Woo!
Hey, okay.
Hey,
You're
hey.
in. This is the last time you guys will be hearing
Let's
Jake.
change my nickname. I'm no longer identifying as Caucasian.
Yeah, you really took a turn here.
Hey, man, I was against the KKK guy. This isn't my fault.
You know, me and Taylor will take it from here. We got it. The rest
Sorry.
of this.
I need to sit this one out there. Oh boy! All right. Well,
Now that
He
you've
claims
wrecked
he's
the
a
show.
gorilla. I mean, this has nothing to
It's
do
been
with
a good
race.
run, guys. It's been a good year and a half or so. Appreciate all the listeners.
so he does his amateur thing. He gets his pro fight, knocks the guy out in the second round. His second fight's with Sean Jordan.
That's isn't that like a bullshit decision.
Yeah, it is, and that one eats at him for a long time, and then he gets his chance at revenge and kind of blows
That's
it.
the part they leave out a lot of stuff. He
Yeah.
gets that chance for retribution. It doesn't happen.
Yeah, he blows that one. But you know what's funny? I can't remember if it was the first or second fight, but he was already trolling reporters. I read an interview from back then around that time of the fight. And there's actually video of it online too. And they're asking him, this is right around the time of the HGH stuff. And so he's just trolling the reporters, talking about like not caring about HGH. He quit like a few months back or something like that. I mean, he's just absolutely trolling everyone.
Just nonstop. Have you heard him say why he always gives like the off the wall answers?
No.
He basically just said like he's super uncomfortable with interviews and he gets tired of the same questions over and over again, which are just brutal. I mean, shit, when we do this research, man, like half these interviews are so brutal. Was it one of the last ones we did? Was it Jake when you were here? What the hell was the last one you were here for?
Riddle.
Well, Riddle. I don't know. There was like a Flow Combat, and I don't mean to throw them under the bus, but there was like an interview they did that was just so cookie cutter, man. Just the same questions over and over with your typical answers. Well, Lewis said basically when he gets these, he just gets sick of it. It might have been the Lewis research. Do we have a Flow Combat article?
I don't know. I like their
I know.
stuff,
Sorry,
typically.
but it was kind of brutal, and just he gets sick of it, so he just gives whatever comes to mind an off the wall answer to try to keep it light. And it's hard to blame him because I'm sure you get sick of that shit.
Well, Lewis would take these fights, and then finally, after winning quite a few of them, besides the Sean Jordan one, he finally gets his chance on April 19th, 2014, to make his octagon debut against Jack May. And in the first round, TKO immediately. And this marked his 5th consecutive win and 5th consecutive knockout. From there, Lewis would defeat 8 of his next 10 opponents, 7 of them by knockout. Lewis was a budding contender in the heavyweight division, but it was his next fight that would propel him into stardom. And as we said in the opening of our episode, it wasn't so much the performance in the fight that would draw the attention of the masses, but his performance on the mic afterwards.
Well, besides all the joking and stuff, the lead up to this fight was actually a really big deal too, because this is when Travis Brown was dealing with the domestic situation, which didn't result in any charges being filed, but he was dealing with it. And obviously that kind of stuff, it's, Derrick Lewis, it's pretty upsetting to him considering what he grew up around. So he was really looking forward to fighting Travis Brown and kind of take, it's kind of a cool story that in the end he gets to kind of bully the bully. You know what I mean? And look, charges weren't filed, but she posted some pretty brutal pictures, and Derrick Lewis ran with that. He said, look, I'm going to defend this woman. He did. It was a crazy fight, actually. Travis Brown was in control in the first round, and it was cool to see Lewis come back. But yeah, so even in the middle of this dramatic win, Derrick Lewis still finds a way to make it lighthearted. And I know you're gonna. This is the shitting one, right? You want to tell? So he says he's like, was he holding his stomach? I think.
Yeah, because Travis Brown kicked him.
Yeah,
that's
the reality.
Like towards the liver area, so he was pretty hurt.
Yeah, so he's holding the side, and then they ask him why he's holding the side or whatever. He says he has to take a shit.
And he's like, hey. Yeah, how badly hurt were you? You were holding your side. Oh, no problem. I just have to do a number 2.
Yeah, you say you had to take a boom boom.
Take a boom boom.
Yeah, but then he even does, isn't that where he hits the where's Rhonda's fine ass?
At the very end, yes.
But that, again, it's where he's so calculated because he really is happily married. He loves his family, and he still is calculated enough to drop the where's Rhonda's fine ass, which again makes all the headlines. Yep. That coupled with the shitting comment, he becomes an internet superstar.
And then it carries over into the post-fight press conference as well, which let's just play a little clip of that because this is pretty good.
What hurt when he kicked you? And obviously it hurt pretty bad. I mean, it
was more of I'm just trying not to shit on myself, because I'm holding my gas in and trying to breathe at the same time. I just didn't want to shit in front of national TV. That's all that was.
It happens to everybody once in their lifetimes. That's what I've heard.
I didn't want to have
not on TV,
because especially with this internet going around, making memes of me and all of that. Nah, I can't have that on Charlie Brown.
Before the second one, I kind of started to wonder maybe are you kind of playing possum with the whole thing, but that was legit. I mean, he got you in the midsection, and how did you work through that? How were you able to work through it?
I just eased out a little fart. And just trying to clear my stomach out just a little bit. And just once I did that, it was good. Then the second round, it came back again, just stopped bubbling. Then I was like, I got to end this fight.
Have you guys ever shat yourself?
Ooh. Hold on. I don't think so.
I was in my dad's basement. I was like 20 something, and I was like moving boxes and stuff, and I was sick. I was sick for like 2 days, and I thought it was a fart, and I was wrong, and it was horrifying.
I have sharded,
and
yes.
then so like I had to like devise a game plan to get the clothes into the dryer and go up and like take a shower. It was a whole thing. It was like a half an hour mission.
Have you ever heard of this is not my situation, but we have a friend. Did you hear the Brown Bandit incident? We won't name names, but
I can take a guess, but no.
Can you explain to people what banditing
so
is?
Within our group of friends, it's called the Wet Bandit. Back in college, people would have some drinks, maybe a few too many, and overnight there'd be a little visit from the Wet Bandit where they might have an accident in their pants and leave something behind. So eventually on someone's birthday, they had a few too many drinks and woke up they had like gone outside and they were like I think they were in their car, like in the back or in the passenger seat. But the bottom line is there was a brown bandit.
Oh my goodness.
And that was very unfortunate.
So I'm going to need names after this.
After we record, I will share, but I don't know, but I think it's Joe Rogan who said you haven't lived until you've shit your pants, right? Isn't that?
I think the quote is, if you haven't shat your pants, you're not taking enough chances.
There it is. That's it.
Which is kind of phenomenal.
So good.
All right. Well, Lewis,
we skipped right over you, Taylor. How about you?
I said I did. I won't go into the details of that story, but yes, it
keep
happened.
going back to it. First the racist stuff, now the shitting the pants thing. Let's get the explicit
I
tag.
hope you enjoy your last time on this podcast.
Hey, I'm going out with a bang.
All right. Well, Lewis had gained the attention of national media with his comments, and just 6 months later, he would make headlines once again, though this time not for what he said before or after a fight. In fact, it wouldn't have anything to do with fighting, unless, of course, you count fighting to save someone's life.
Oh my God. Okay, this story is like phenomenal on a million different levels. So what, isn't he? I think he's sitting at home with his wife. They're watching the rescue efforts from the hurricane. Was it Hurricane Harvey?
Mm-hmm.
Watching the rescue efforts, and I want to say they heard that the emergency team or whatever was not coming out unless it was a life or death situation. And Derrick Lewis is like, well, this is bullshit. These people need help. They're seeing the clips on the news. So he decides to go out and help himself, and he just gets his truck, right? And he just goes out to help. All I know is the one guy in particular that he decides to help, the Confederate flag, is like my favorite story in the world. So, Derrick Lewis comes, shows up to help save this dude, and what the guy's like, all he had was his clothes. Was there a wife and kids?
Yeah, the wife was like, leave it behind or whatever.
And he's like, I gotta have my Confederate flag, and he's like super embarrassed, but he has to have it.
He was apologizing to Lewis.
Yeah, because he
time.
like knew it was so ingrained in him. He had to have his flag, but he's apologizing to the black gentleman who was saving his life. You fucking idiot. I'm sorry, but that guy's a jackass. Maybe that's the time you leave the flag behind and change your fucking life.
These colors don't run.
Yeah. Well, that's my mistake. Maybe that's the time you realize you're wrong. When the guy sees your Confederate flag, he still saves your life.
Hey, how about your house is flooding and that's the thing you get? Forget the racism attached to it. Is that really your most valuable possession? A flag that you could buy at any store in Texas? Hey man, priorities here.
Since I've been flagged as a racist here, I want to publicly disavow this. This is not a good thing. He should have left that flag and thank that gentleman for saving his life. Thank you.
And Lewis says that he estimates that he helped over 100 people. Right?
I can't get past this.
I know.
I'm sorry.
Get past the one. I know.
How is that your life? Like you said, in your life, how does it get to that point where you're literally leaving everything behind and you're like, you have one chance and it's the Confederate flag?
Yeah, it's not the cat or
anything.
Like
some photo album.
Something with your kids.
PS4. But the Confederate flag. And you could reconsider when you see who's saving you. Like, you know what? I was going to take the flag, but now I'm going with the PS4. That's your chance. And this guy rolled with it.
There's a blanket my mother-in-law knitted. I should probably grab that.
You know, what's really funny about that, though, funny is probably the wrong word, but is that he is apologetic. It's like he knows he's an asshole. And he's because it's one thing if the guy grabs it and he's like, screw you. I don't care if you're saving me. This is how I feel. But he's apologizing. He knows he's in the wrong. What are you doing at that point? When you know you're being an asshole, ditch the flag, man. And the wife was embarrassed and telling him. So, Yeah, I mean, like you said, that's probably just something that was ingrained into him, deep in him somehow, and he knows it's wrong, but he's sticking to it. But
yeah, so I
yikes.
don't want to take away from the point. Yeah, like you were saying, he literally saved over 100 people. He went back. I think they make a bunch of food for people in neighboring towns and take that over to them while helping them. So that's the thing, man. It's not. It's a very lighthearted. Derrick Lewis is a very funny guy, but man, when you dig a little bit deeper, he's done some incredible things.
Oh, and by the way, we should mention the fact that while saving that gentleman, Derrick Lewis was telling him, like, stop apologizing. Don't worry about it. I don't care. I see this stuff all the time. I've been living in Texas most of my life.
Yeah, as a black guy in the South, I'm sure he's no stranger to racism.
Yeah, but it's amazing him taking the higher road, not just saving the guy, but then seeing that and not being bitter, not, taking his anger or whatever out on the guy, just being like, you know what? I don't care, man. I'm here to save you.
Yeah, and don't forget his past. Everything he's been through, everything he grew up around. The fact that he takes the high road there is amazing because most people that had a totally normal childhood wouldn't take the high road there.
It's amazing that the maturity that Derrick Lewis has grown into to where he's at now. I mean, this wasn't the same guy 15 years ago. He's a completely different human being, and it's amazing to watch.
The quote you read, I mean, that 3 years really straightened him out, and obviously having kids did too. He just got his priorities in line.
All right, well, with a national media coverage, an insanely funny Instagram, and the respect of fight fans, the Black Beast was quickly becoming a household name. There was just one thing missing: UFC gold. And the path to gold ran through the elite of the heavyweight division, including a fighter Lewis had been calling out for years, another heavy-handed knockout artist, Francis Ngannou. This fight promised fireworks. An edge-of-the-seat, breath-holding clash of two titans in the prime of their careers. But what happened next was beyond anyone's imagination.
Okay, I'm sorry to ruin your fucking movie trailer right there, but if you got to tell his full story, though, we have to go actually back. Because, again, this is what people do. They pick and choose. Because you're right, he did get to this huge fight that we thought was going to be the best fight ever. But in the middle of that run, we should tell the fans, he did lose to Mark Hunt, okay? Lewis is on an amazing run, but he lost clean. He blames the back, which we wouldn't be doing his story justice if we didn't bring his back up, because it comes up all the time. But he gets to Mark Hunt. He takes a fight, because, again, he does the same thing he always says. I need to take a break. I need to do this. And they offer him a headlining gig against Mark Hunt, and he gets his ass beat. It derails the whole hype train, because he was on this path to fight Ngannou. It was the two young studs coming up who was going to be the one to take down Stipe. And he gets totally derailed by Mark Hunt. Ngannou gets derailed by Stipe. And then the classic UFC, I think they just went right back to it. They're like, all right, now let's match him up or whatever. So it lost some of the hype because of that headlining loss. Because again, if I'm a fan and I'm hearing this story, I'm hearing all these knockouts, all these wins, and I'm going like, so he's just perfect? No, he's not perfect, but he has won 9 out of 10.
No, that's very good. I'm glad you brought that up. That's the perfect time to bring that up, because this fight was, like you said, before all of that, they were the two up-and-coming guys. So this fight was meant to happen. They had both been calling for the fight against each other. It's just unfortunate that they both had to lose for them to come. So it took a little steam out of the sails, but make no mistake, these are still two of the hardest-hitting heavyweights in heavyweight history.
So much so it's scary. Like that one Ngannou knockout was like
the ovary one.
Yeah, like that's just brain damage. That's what you call brain damage. Like that's
those
horrifying.
are the ones that make you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
To this day, that makes me uncomfortable when I see that.
Yeah.
You're just like, ugh.
So this promised, like, we were thinking, holy cow, don't breathe.
Oh man,
because
the weigh-ins were tense too.
I told my wife, okay, this fight, don't take your eyes off the screen. It's going to be 30 seconds, maybe a minute, 2 minutes, max.
God, and then it happened. That was a shit show.
And then it goes down as quite possibly the worst heavyweight fight of all time.
Well, what's awesome is that this is where Derrick Lewis does still continue to find a way outside of the octagon to always kind of get himself out of some of these messes with what he says. Because, again, you get to the end of this fight, you're really upset. He squeaks out a decision in a snoozer, and he immediately explains it. did they have to ask? I wish I could remember this. Did they ask him about his back, or did he bring it up himself? I don't remember.
I don't recall. I remember the audio on the feed caught
between rounds.
Caught him telling his corner.
So his back acted up, which is a well-known issue with him to this day. He just did an interview this week, and he's just like, it's a day-to-day thing, every day with my back. You don't know if he's going to wake up and have to pull out of a fight. Ngannou, however, there wasn't much of an excuse. They don't know if mentally the Stipe fight did him in, but I mean, this fight went from the most exciting fight of maybe 2018 to being maybe the worst fight ever.
And didn't Ngannou like not throw a punch or something?
I think it was like almost like a record-setting lack of punches.
It was, and just for those listening that think maybe Black Beast is making excuses here when he's talking about his back, if you've ever, I tore a muscle in my back, not pulled, tore a muscle in my back. I could not literally move. I had to sit in one spot without moving. I could not get in and out of my vehicle the first couple days after I tore it. And by the way, there's nothing you can do. The doctor just wait it out. That's all you can do. Wait for it to heal. And I remember letting it heal for a couple of weeks, maybe even longer than that, and going to do something or pick something up and re-injuring it. Not even something heavy. I wasn't like in the gym doing lat pulls or anything. This was just a normal activity, and it re-injured just like that. So now imagine being a fighter fighting 250-pound trained fighters. Good luck.
It's like the dark cloud hanging over the whole situation is that even if this like, you know, underdog Cinderella run ends with a title win, it's that you really never know when his back is going to act up, and he will continue to take the fights. I mean, he's fought like 16 times in 4 years. He fights at an insane pace. He's going to take some fight that he shouldn't, and the back will flare up. And I mean, he's tried. His team was one of the big fights recently. He backed out of. I don't remember which one it was, but his team like made him back out. He did not want to. He never wants to. I don't remember who it was at this moment, but either way, he tries to fight through it, and that's scary that even if this does work out, that might come back to haunt him.
Yeah, there's probably an expiration date on his career that's fast approaching, but until then, Lewis has now positioned himself to be at Madison Square Garden, and so he wins the fight against Ngannou, and he had all but, undone everything he had worked up to that point because he loses to Mark Hunt, and then he's in this snoozer with Ngannou. But instead of fans laughing along with him as they had been before, now they're laughing at him. So social media is swirling with memes and hateful comments. I read, some fans writing that like he should just stop fighting for good. Like he should never fight again after the Ngannou fight. I mean, crazy comments going around, but he just, in true Black Beast fashion, he just needed one more fight to completely turn everything around. So the stage was set. UFC 229, Conor Khabib, the biggest card in UFC history, over 2 million people watching, and Black Beast is going to get his chance again. The pressure is enough to make even the strongest person fold, but for Lewis, it lit a fire.
You son of a bitch. I already know where you're going with this, and I'm not rolling with it. You can go to hell. No, worth noting, he was supposed to be the co-main event on that Conor card, and they pushed it down. But again, he always finds a way to make the most of it. So he fights Volkov. As documented on this podcast, we had a lot of people that night with bets on that fight. Parlays are lying on that fight. Very emotional scene as we all watched it. But yeah, I mean, Volkov's beast. You're waiting to see what happens, and Lewis just proceeds to get his ass beat for about 14 minutes, I'd say. I love his corner. I love the clips of his corner just blatantly telling him, like, hey, we're down 2-0. I love the honest corner. I don't know if it's just me, but I hate the bullshit corner. Doing great, champ.
You're doing great. Keep it up, pal.
He's like, sir, we're clearly down 2. But they tell him, and, they're like, hey, man, you got to go for the home run. You got to go for the knockout. And boy, did he ever. I mean, just, was it 20 seconds ago, 30 seconds ago, he lands, and it is over.
And then
oh my
Joe Rogan
you can do it. No, you already made the fire joke. I'll let you take that shit.
No. I was just setting you guys up. Jake, I'm surprised you didn't run with that.
Well, so we mentioned it before, like, you know, how he sets up these jokes. Is he really serious about having to poop or not? Do you think his balls were really hot? I mean, my money's on yes.
He's addressed this. You know this, right? It's not true. It's not. He said he intended on throwing his shorts into the crowd and kind of came to his senses, realized he needed to put them back on, but he got put on the spot and went with that story.
My balls was hot.
I think what's missing in all of this, and it's a real shame that nobody is really calling this out, is that Joe Rogan responds immediately like, I understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
I understand.
I've been there.
That should not be breezed over, guys.
Well, he does have comedic timing.
Because when Brian Stan was interviewing Derrick Lewis and Lewis was talking about having to boo-boo, Brian Stan was thrown so off. It was I'm not, shitting on Brian Stan.
Yeah, well, he's a beast.
He's the man, but Rogan just, I understand. Like, he just rolls with it.
Like Jake alluded to, that's that, years and years on stage, improv and comedy. Like, he knows exactly what to say.
And I think he knew at that point that anything can come out of Black Beast's mouth.
And he probably, truthfully, knows exactly what Black Beast is doing, honestly. He knows it's comedy. But that was fantastic.
So, and then, which shouldn't go unmentioned, that Rogan talks about Black Beast having one of the best Instagrams in the game, and then he goes from 400,000 followers to 1.23 million overnight.
So this is kind of the perfect storm here, where he gets all these Instagram followers, kind of has one of the quotes of the night. On a pretty dark night, it's a lighthearted moment, so it's like a good contrast, and people kind of run with it. And, and some of that build up to this card, and even after, like, there was some jabs going with him in DC, all lighthearted, but just some jabs back and forth about, like, DC saying at the press conference, like, Derrick Lewis been sizing me up in the back, and he says he's upset with me, and they say it's over, like, the Popeyes commercial or some shit. Or was that the
yeah, he said you're disrespecting Popeyes because of his
Louisiana background.
No, because of DC's it's all about that cake video.
Yes, that's what it was. Yeah. So, but just, you could see it, you can almost see the chemistry between the two of them, and if you watch the clip in the press conference, you can almost see it in Dana's eyes that it might have been the origin of the idea of this short notice fight, because at the time the UFC is dying to find a main event for Madison Square Garden. They can't pull anything off, and you can almost see Dana's like, man, maybe Cormier would come fight him.
Does make sense.
I mean, I really genuinely, bet in the house, I believe that fight was created in that press conference. I think Dana was looking for ideas and they didn't know what to do, and it probably got him thinking. And a couple phone calls later, here we are now.
It's amazing obviously the knockout contributed to it, but it was a snoozer up until that point, and he was coming off the worst, or what is deemed to be the worst heavyweight fight in history. So you're coming off a loss, the worst heavyweight fight in history, and then an absolute snoozer where you're getting destroyed for 2.5 rounds. With 2 punches and 1 amazing comment, you're headlining Madison Square Garden. How insane.
Are we going to touch on how Cormier essentially said that, like, he doesn't want to fight Stipe, and, like, he took the Lewis fight because he thinks he's well matched, which he is. I mean, you have someone who can take people down like that. Obviously, that's Lewis's kryptonite. So, I mean, I do think that has to be mentioned. I definitely, Lewis earned it. His comedy and his kind of off the wall, what's going to happen now thing kind of put him in the spotlight. And then to some extent, Cormier thinking he could win is absolutely why he took that fight.
That's where I think I am a hypocritical fan sometimes, because I feel like if somebody said what DC said that I did not like, I'd be like, he's fucking ducking him. This is bullshit. And then DC says it, and I'm like, so honest. He's just amazing. He's just such an honest guy. And I'm like, God, I hate myself. But you're right, man. He did. He is ducking him, but.
Well, DC's playing it smart. Well, look, Stipe is not the draw that Derrick Lewis is after that comment.
Let's be fair. He has said he's been very open for a while now. He's going to fight 1, 2, 3 more times max, and you can just see it's like, look, he's a company guy. They needed help in Madison Square Garden on like a month's notice. He's going to take a fight he can win with a guy who's, made a bigger name for himself overnight than Stipe did during his entire run. And he's got the Brock fight, the John Jones. He doesn't want anything other than that. And hey, let the guy retire, man. We talk a lot about CTE, concussions, this and that. If the guy has a plan and he's got his family, let him leave. So I get what he's doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I want to be clear, I'm not faulting him for it.
No, it's a good point.
Worth
No, it's a very good point.
All right. Well, that seems like a good place to conclude Derrick Lewis's story. That brings us up to date. But as always, there's more to the story than what you just heard. So let's get into our takeaways from the episode, and then we can maybe discuss some things we might have left out. So who wants to start us off? You want to go, Tim?
Well, just always been a big Black Beast fan. The research, it was interesting. A lot of the stuff, about the situation with the gentleman, the potential ties to KKK, all that stuff with that guy. That was interesting. I really thought, for me, the biggest takeaway from this and Derrick Lewis's story was just that, I think somebody, Mendenhall or somebody, said something similar, so I don't want to steal their line, but basically, look, he's already won the biggest fight. He really did have that upbringing that was terrible, that he hit on every potential issue that children have that lead to a terrible life, where the domestic violence continues and they spiral into crime. He had all those things going against him, and he came through it and has become a millionaire, essentially. And he's got this amazing future with his personality, where who knows where he goes down the road. He might have some longevity to him, because to be honest, when you watch some videos of him, you do get worried. You see how much money he's spending. He's going and getting boats and getting cars. And I would be saying, I'd be worried about somebody else. But the good news with him is, with his personality, he might end up on some ESPN panel or desk, or I could see him sitting there with the other athletes just shooting the shit, joking around. He'd be great on one of those morning shows. So you hope that he has some longevity here, because ultimately, for somebody to grow up around domestic violence, spend time in prison, nearly get shot with a shotgun, and then to turn out to be this amazing family man that basically risks death every time he steps into a cage to support his family, it's an awesome story.
That's part of the reason why I love MMA and fighting in general, is because a lot of times guys with these backgrounds get into fighting because it's just survival. It's what they know. They're athletic. They're fighting anyway. Sure, I might as well get good at it. And then all of a sudden, 15 years later, they have a career that they can sustain. They become successes. They get themselves out of those shitty situations. And that's why we love the sport, because of those great stories.
Yeah, for me, I think, and this happens frequently when we do these episodes, and it's part of what makes them so much fun to look at. When you take a snapshot of somebody's life, not just their career, but when you take a snapshot of their life, you're able to take a step back and see how many different directions things could have gone. And it's amazing. It's one thing to see the finished product. As a writer, I think about this often with other writers. I mean, I joked about your Joe Hill book, but his dad, Stephen King, Joe Hill, what you have in your hand is the finished product. You don't get to see Joe Hill's rough draft of that novel, right? But here we get to see the rough draft. We get to see the dark stuff, the unpolished stuff. And you get to see, man, if Derrick's mom hadn't taken him away, what might have happened in New Orleans? Man, if Lewis hadn't gotten to that altercation and gone to prison, maybe he wouldn't be the person he is today. If his friend hadn't pushed him, or if he had chosen boxing instead of MMA, if he wasn't the talker that he is, maybe he's just a hard-hitting gatekeeper in the heavyweight division, and we're not doing an episode on him. It's just crazy. We talk about the 6 degrees of Conor McGregor. It's crazy, and I've already gone over it, but how you can go from a loss and the worst fight ever to headlining Madison Square Garden. It's crazy how you can go from watching your mother be abused to being able to buy her house to having your own kids and be able to be such a good father to your kids and treat your wife well. And it's what I love about doing these episodes. And I don't mean to get so serious, but it's a lot of fun, because all you're seeing is the knockouts and then the funny, dry humor afterwards. And it's a lot of fun to look at everything and see how he got to this point.
But that whole thing you just went over is it's like a microcosm for Lewis's whole life. Like, he gets knocked down. Even his fights themselves are a microcosm for it, because he gets knocked down all the time. He always gets taken, like, whether it's a shitty fight, whether it's the damage he takes, whether it's going to prison, everything. And he always comes back. And that's the thing. I know he's a heavy underdog against Cormier, people say, oh, he's got a puncher's chance, but it's like, yeah, but that's the whole thing with Derrick Lewis is like, he's always quote unquote had a puncher's chance. And the
That's all
thing
he
is,
needs.
is
It's a hell of a
one.
punch.
And even if there's 20 seconds left, everybody in the arena knows, everybody that night at the fight watching it knew he needed to land one, and he did. And he does it over and over again. And the thing is we forget how often he does it because he takes so much damage. But then you go, oh shit, he's won 9 out of 10. There are not many fighters in the UFC period that have won 9 out of 10. And he's doing it against some big names. So I know DC's the favorite, and as well he should be. But do not count out Derrick Lewis, because just like his entire life, he's been up against it. He might come through yet again.
That's a very good point. So anything we left out, one thing I did want to talk about was just his post-fight with Roy Nelson, Zach's favorite fighter. After he wins the Roy Nelson fight, he's at the press conference and he's literally sleeping on the table.
Perfect.
He is asleep on the table, and they're like
laid back dude.
I think one of the UFC guys has to go like tap him on the shoulder, and he like wakes up.
He always said he doesn't like the interviews, so I mean,
then you have to carbo load before a fight.
I mean, this is true.
I feel a little sleepy.
There was I think it was an Instagram or maybe Twitter, but I think it was Instagram, him going to his younger, I think his younger brother's school, that maybe the youngest in the family. And the principal or one of the teachers is up on the stage in the cafeteria because he goes to bring his brother McDonald's. And the lady announces like through the microphone that he's in the cafeteria, and all the kids come running up to him,
Yes.
And he is just so, it's like he's so shy, but he's happy at the same time, you know? And he's like shaking their hand and saying hello. And the younger brother's just sitting there eating his McDonald's like he doesn't give a shit. You know?
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, but it's just it's a good thing to see. It's a good moment. It's the stuff that you don't get to see. It's the stuff I wish they would show more of. And you don't have to give only the good stuff, but it's fun to see that kind of stuff, because without the Hurricane Harvey stuff, without mentioning that, Lewis could come off like, I don't know, kind of a jerk at sometimes, but
that's what drives me insane. And I'm so sorry to keep going to it, but to watch these things that they put out, and all they do is reference it, some of the dirty shit he says about him and his wife, or the situation with jail, not even explaining why he truly went to jail. And yet, in reality, how can I watch a 30-minute show and not hear one thing about what he did with the hurricane survivors?
Yeah, being a legitimate hero. Like, that's hero status.
And I don't care if they told it on a prior one, because they probably told the prison thing on a prior one, too. The hurricane shit should come back each and every time they document him and his career, because that's something nobody would do. The 1% of the 1% would go help and do that. And he did it. So he's a fucking champion.
Yeah, that's not a UFC motivated charity. No. That's not an obligation.
Didn't he donate like 10 grand? Like
that was in conjunction with the UFC, just to be clear. The donation part was UFC combined.
Yeah.
They donated that money, but him going out of his home after watching the news,
out of his own pocket, they just matched it or something, right?
Yeah,
just
so he worked with them.
Yeah.
Yes. But the going out and helping people was totally unprovoked, and it eventually he teamed up with Trade of Truth, who I mentioned on an earlier episode. Whoop, and they teamed up and worked together to get people out of there. So I mean, it inspired other people. Obviously, J.J. Watt did a lot of stuff down there too. Yeah. But
he's just
it needs to be mentioned, and a lot of this stuff goes unmentioned, which is why we're here.
I was gonna say, I mean, when we have a sport that's fighting for its life, where buy rates it's been a rough year for pay-per-views, right? The whole deal. Maybe let's skip the 10 minutes of him running up and down a hill and hitting mitts and bring up the hurricane. I don't know. Or, a little more time with his family and his wife and kids. Shit like that.
All right. That seems like a good place to end it. 2 men fighting inside a steel cage isn't for everyone, but stories like Derrick Lewis's are. This is MMA Untold. If you didn't know, now you know.
It's all good. And if you don't know, now you know, you know.
Well, I'm packing out my game and I'ma head out west, where real women come equipped with scripts and fake breasts. Find a nest in the hills, chill like Flint. Buy an old drop top, find a spot to pimp, and I'ma Kid Rocket up and down your block with a bottle of scotch and botch lots of crotch. Buy a yacht with a flag saying chillin' the most. And rock that bitch up and down the coast.